My next guest is here to talk about a feature film which will go into production early next year, hopefully. It's going to be called Housing Block 25. Christopher Wingate is my guest. He's in the studio. G'day, Chris.
Good morning, Ron. How are you?
Good, thanks, mate. Nice to meet you. It's a fascinating story, and it's, I'm led to believe, fairly close to the truth. It's sort of based on a true story of your very own.
Yes, it is.
You were very successful at a very young age. You came up with a fabulous idea to make yourself lots of money at the end of the day, but the idea was stolen. Would you like to sort of briefly outline what is your story, and that would ergo mean you're outlining what the film is about?
Well, it was my 30th birthday, and I had various friends from around the world staying with us in New Zealand, and we're over on the coast, and there was a property called Matakana Island situated where we were eating. And I wondered, you know, who were the owners of the land, what was happening, and I found out that the property was actually in receivership. It was a forestry operation, 10,000 acres on the coast.
You should put out just near Tauranga.
That's right.
And just across the way from Mount Maunganui.
That's right, yep. Yes. So to cut a long story short, I negotiated the price down from 30 plus million to 20 million. I had a buyer for the 17 to 34-year-old forest. They were paying 15.75 million. So I only needed 4.25 million. So I went to a merchant bank to borrow that money. Their security was going to be the 10,000 acres of land, the 1 to 16-year-old forest. We would then sell the 1 to 16-year-old for around about 7 or 8 million, end up with the land for free, and have a few $1 million in our pocket. But the bank loved the deal so much they stole it from me. Set up a $100 shelf company and went and did the deal themselves. So then I became involved in litigation. The barristers said 80 to 100,000, less than 2 years, slam dunk, I'll win. After 2 years, I'd spent $500,000. They'd managed to offload it to local Maoris who were claiming it was sacred. And I finally got them to the High Court in 1997 in New Zealand. It was a 4-week trial, absolutely hammered them.
And the crux of the whole thing really was the fiduciary matter,
yes.
Really, with both, well, in some respects the merchant bank, but I guess in some respects the solicitors as well, the law system of New Zealand.
Well, fiduciary is an old Latin word from fiducia, and it means trust. These are people in society who stand up and say, you know, trust us with our expertise. So judges, lawyers, politicians, these are all fiduciaries. And, you know, I won the trial against the bank. I won the retrial. But then when it went to the Court of Appeal, the Maoris lawyer suddenly jumped up and he said, what the Crown has to consider here is that the sacred land is now in the hands of the traditional landowners, and maybe the bank did wrong, but the more important issue is the ownership of the land. So what they did was they constructed a fictional judgment, and so my complaints began from that point onwards, not only with the judiciary but also with the politicians.
Because the irony of all this is you had a very good relationship with the Maoris, did you not?
Excellent relationship, yeah. I grew up in Rotorua, Central North Island, and a brilliant relationship. I never knew that they were Maoris, they were just my friends.
Yeah. And in fact, your objectives in the whole matter were questioned, and the fact that people obviously were thinking you were trying to rip off the Maoris.
Well, they did think that. In fact, just last year they set up certain Maoris set up a website, basically, you know, kill Chris Wingate. So they set it up on Facebook, and so they sent it to me to scare me, but I joined. Then they turned around when they realised that, in fact, their leadership were the ones who were ripping the people off. They changed the name of the website to go after them, which was rather funny.
And there was a little tragedy there too, because one of the chiefs that you were dealing with was killed under very suspicious circumstances.
He was, Sonny Tafi. He was a tremendous guy. He was the Waitangi, a bit like a Mabo claimant. Yeah. And Sonny had put in the Waitangi claim, and that's what the Maoris used in court to gain sympathy from the judges. But after I lost in the Court of Appeal and prior to going to the Privy Council in London, Sonny contacted me and said that, you know, the information's been hidden from him. What's going on? What is the deal? What, you know, we've heard that we won. What have we won? And so I started asking him what he knew, and he simply, him and the rest of the people knew nothing. So I gave him a couple of inches, about half a kilo of documents, contracts and so on. And he challenged them on the marae and really tore them to pieces. His body was found on the 8th of July in the back seat of a burnt-out car. and the police inquiry was an absolute sham. There were 4 witnesses within 48 hours who stated that one particular shareholder of the Maori company was after him, but he never got questioned.
7 minutes to 11, and Christopher Wingate is my guest, talking about a story that we need to probably fast forward to the fact that after the Privy Council and $5.5 million in costs, you finished up without too much.
Exactly, and you raised the point about fiduciary before. I was incredibly annoyed that I could end up with fictional judgments, facts that were just clearly wrong. You could simply prove it. In fact, I was so naive, I sort of thought that you could pop down to the courthouse, show the judges, and they'd give you a pat on the back and a cup of tea and a cookie. But the system doesn't work like that. If they come out with a judgment, that becomes what they term as a fact. But if those facts are absolute crap, you can't do anything about it. I complained to Parliament. I went before Justice Select Committees. I had one politician who was on my side, and in fact he was ready to run it through Parliament.
Yeah.
I passed that comment on to a number of lawyers, and then suddenly there was an explosion in his daughter's house and his 2 grandkids were killed.
Good Lord. And of course there's the, what do they call it now, is the division of power?
Separation of power.
Separation of power.
Well, the politicians claim that they can't interfere with the judiciary, but that's just total nonsense because, separation of power is all about checks and balances.
Yeah.
So when I went to them and said, well, where are your checks and balances? They turned around and said, but we can't interfere with the judiciary because there are separate hands on the power. And separation means that we can't interfere. So I said, well, what about the checks and balances? But what happens with politicians and, bureaucracy is that these people turn around and they just ignore your question.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
I want to talk about the film in just a tick, but how did you finish up over in this side of Australia?
Good friend of mine, Rolly Tasker, the yachty.
Okay,
I've known Rolly for probably 28 years. And Rolly had been in New Zealand for the America's Cup. And he saw what was going on. He said, look, you've got to get out of here. You've got to come to West Australia. So over we came.
Glad you did.
I think so, yeah. I very much so miss New Zealand.
Yeah.
It is my home. I did leave there when I was 18 to come to Australia. Then I returned there to have the kids. And West Australia is nice. There are some interesting people, but I think one of the problems with West Australia is everybody's very casual. It's sort of wait a while for everything.
That's so. Let's talk. Let's talk about the film that you hope to do about this whole story. How did the idea of the film come about?
Well, it was rather funny. We've been working on a documentary called The Fiduciary Disguise, which we are going to name Idiots in Power. The documentary is about the litigation. It's about what happens when you end up with a decision out of government, our most important fiduciaries. What happens when the decision's wrong? What can you do about it? And of course you can't do anything about it because judges and politicians have crown and judicial immunity. I had just an obstacle in my mind as far as the documentary. It's sort of hard, but the message is critically important because these are the people that we trust to run our systems of state. So I thought that I really needed to do a feature film based on the story that I could dramatise out a lot of the things that had actually occurred. And make it, more appealable to the wider market, and of course that would create a bridge directly to the documentary. Yeah. And
a production company, you have to set up that yourself, or how have you gone about it?
Well, I've got a good mate, Christopher Atkins, who was the star of Blue Lagoon.
Oh, okay.
I've known Chris for many, many years, and he's actually come down here to Bunbury, hung out with us down here. When I, first thought up the idea, I phoned Chris and said, how do I go about it? I've utilised various people involved in the making of the documentary. So I'm also a member of Film Television Institute. Paul Roberts from there, he's a well-known director. Paul's based in Melbourne now, but it's basically just a collaboration of a whole group of people. I wasn't sure where to film it, and finally it dawned on me, why not Bunbury?
Why not Bunbury?
Yeah, Bunbury's a nice place.
Yeah, so how are you going to go about it? How are we going to cast it? Because I notice here there's a cast of thousands.
Yeah, we will. I guess the main thing is to start, looking for actors. And as far as the technical aspect, my main focus is on the quality of the visual, and that's why we've selected the Red One camera for that. That's the latest technology in the world. Sound and lighting. Obviously, the next part is actors.
So you've written the script yourself?
Yes.
And you say it starts out as a fairly serious piece, but it finishes up as a bit of a comedy.
A real comedy, yeah.
Yeah, and it tells the story of a group of people who finish up in this Block 25.
Well, the story is basically that this character, Wilson, who was in fact me, he starts off as a millionaire businessman. Then at one stage he's a billionaire. After winning the main hearing, then loses, fights the system, carries on fighting, doesn't focus on business, goes completely broke, ends up in public housing. And
did you finish up in public housing?
No, we didn't.
Oh, okay.
No,
so
no, that part didn't happen. But
poetic license there, yeah. Okay,
yeah, that's right. That's the poetic license. But the funny thing is that my wife and I were driving past a new public housing building, and she said, "Can you imagine the characters that are going to be moving in there? The new one out at Dalyellup." And I said, "Don't laugh. We may end up in there." And that from that, the idea jumped into my mind.
Yeah. Well, you certainly sound like somebody who's never afraid to have a bit of a go.
I think in life you've got to have a go. You only live once. Life's short and fast. Yeah. So, go for it.
If there's anyone listening this morning who sort of fancies themselves an actor or would like to get involved in this, how do they go about it?
They can they contact the station here, or do you want an email address?
Probably an email. You give us an email address so that if they do contact us, we can...
Certainly, yeah. Wingate Family, Wingate, okay. Wingate Family at bigpond.com.au.
Okay. And it's Wingate, not Wingate. Wingate.
Yes.
Good. We've run out of time. Christopher, it's been lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too, Ron.
All the best with the film, the project.
Thank you so much.
Your battles. You don't look too battled scarred. You seem to have weathered it fairly well.
Yeah, well, I've...
A few grey hairs.
Yes. I'm 50. I'm allowed a few.